This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Welcome to What's News Dunedin, brought to you by Hazur Kebab, the radio show that spawned from the 21,000 plus strong local Ōtepoti Dunedin What's News Dunedin Facebook group. The group that's been putting the social back into social media since 2020 with respectful adult debate and a sense of humour. I'm your host, Richard Knights. On today's show, we talk to our wonderful guest, Christopher John Ford, who is from the Disabled Persons Assembly, but here in his own personal capacity today, who'll be telling us more about themselves and what they do, as well as helping us look back at the posts that have generated the most interactions over the past 7 days on the What's News Dunedin Facebook group. Those posts this week are Councillor Ong ignoring the requests of the Mayor and CEO and heading to Facebook to rant about the code of conduct complaint he's brought against Council Chambers. A New Zealand sea lion popping into the Marlow Street takeaways for I'm assuming a piece of fish. And the killing/murder of Renee Nicole Good by ICE agents in America. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Kia ora, Richard. Kia ora, listeners. It's good to be back.
Fantastic. And obviously you are, many people who know you and will know that you've actually hosted your own, looked after your own shows on the wonderful OAR FM in the past. But you're on the other side of the mic today. So
I am.
It's been fantastic. So now, I know you're on the What's News Dunedin Facebook group, but you may or may not have seen that we have a Punday Monday where people bring their best jokes and their best dad jokes.
That's right.
On a Monday, and that joins me on the show on a Friday. So we see if that joke jumps off the page and becomes funny in real life as well. So there's no pressure to laugh, but we'll see whether it works. So the pun of the week for this week is: puns about poo are not my favourite, but they are a solid number 2. see, I like that one. Any poo jokes are funny to me.
I won't talk about what I had last week.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. So now, we do, just to warm you into the show, we have 3 pop questions. These are questions I ask my guests just to give them, just to ease them into the situation, but also to let our listeners know exactly who Chris is as a human being. So, first question is cream teas. So you know where you have a scone, you have jam, you have cream. What goes on first, the jam or the cream?
Well, I would dare say it would be the jam, then the cream. I love those sorts of meals. I love that sort of afternoon tea. I don't have it enough myself, I had to say. This could be something that I could work on for 2026. I thought
that's a goal in itself, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of eating, so like any food related goals, I can honestly say that I could support you fully on that.
Absolutely, I think it's something that I could work on for 2026 is having more jam and cream on a scone.
Absolutely,
on a scone, whatever school you went to.
Yeah, exactly. I say it the English way, and I get told off for it, scone. But in the UK, to be fair, if you go up north, it becomes a scone. They change it. It's got halfway up the country. It changes as well. Yes. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. But there is a right and wrong way to do a cream tea, and that is jam first, cream second. So which is the way you've gone for. So which is fantastic.
Good.
Now, second question, equally as important as the first one, but there's no wrong answers with this one. Who is your favourite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?
Oh God. I didn't watch the program, I had to admit that, but it would have to be, I think there was a character called Leonardo.
Yes, Leonardo.
Something like that.
Yep.
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles aired towards the end of my teenage years, so it wasn't in my demographic.
Well, I just remember as a child where they changed it from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they changed it to Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, because they didn't like the implication of the fighting side of things.
Yes.
But of course the cartoon still contained all the fighting, so eventually they changed it back again because it just seems silly that they changed it to Hero Turtles, and then actually the ninja stuff was still there, right? You know, still front and centre.
That was the great allure of it. The young people back in the day,
swinging the nunchucks and all that kind of stuff.
Yes,
so, they're all Renaissance painters. There's no.
Of course, no. Of course they were.
There's no wrong answers.
No, of course, that's right.
when it comes to Leonardo's a good choice. Now, third and final question, and this one is a little bit of a thinker. So, would you rather accidentally like an old photo of your ex on Instagram, or accidentally send a naughty text to a relative?
Ooh, that's tough. I would rather accidentally like an old photo of an ex on Instagram, but I'm not on Instagram, incidentally enough. So that gets me out of it.
Absolutely, and I think I think I'd be the same. It's a bit easier to wash that one away, and kind of go just ignore that, rather as opposed to if you send a naughty text to your nan or something that's going around the family. That's heading around the family pretty quick as well. To be fair,
dodgy territory.
Yeah, you'd be. I think I'd choose the same thing. To be fair, so let's now have a chat about the 3 topics of the week, which is the things that have just shown the most interest over the last 7 days on the What's News Dunedin Facebook group. Now, the first one was there was an OGT article a couple of days ago about Councillor Ong, who previous to Christmas had brought a code of conduct complaint against Councillor Chambers. There is an allegation of some what Councillor Ong is saying as racist commentary. And then, so that before Christmas, there was a story that said the CEO's come out, the mayor's come out and said, "Hey, we're going to appoint an independent person to look at this, like they always do with code of conduct complaints. Please don't talk about it in public because actually, it's that in itself can influence or invalidate the investigation into whether anything wrong has been done." And then 3 days ago, Councillor Ong came out on his own Facebook page and pushed it across to all the sort of the news groups that he hadn't had an apology. Therefore, he was kind of he was up in arms and but then it comes out the following day. These tends to be sort of evening sort of storms. And then the following day it comes out in the ODT that even the ODT have reminded him that. He's not supposed to be emailing them with all their with every communication around the council table. But he's come out, so John Chambers has been quiet through this process.
Of course, he's been observing due process.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the way I look at it. What I struggle with and what I don't understand is why Councillor Ong has felt the need to come out. Everything's been closed. That's the other side of it. It's not like we've been. It's been Christmas, right? So we haven't been able to appoint an adjudicator.
No, absolutely not.
But it just seems there are some people in the world that, in my mind, that you ask them to do something and they go, yeah, that makes sense. I'll do that. I fully understand it. There are other people in the world where you ask them to do something and instantly they do the opposite. And we seem to have that with Councillor Ong, which is what we're trying to say here. The advice he's being given, in my mind, is so that if his complaint is valid, and we don't know the ins and outs of it, then the process will deal with that and support his allegation and provide the outcome that he's looking for. If he doesn't start bashing on about it all over, he's actually really, I think, would have to say, although he's new and every councillor goes through a process, obviously new councillor goes through a process of learning how to do the job on the fly virtually. Yep.
Really, there is a settling-in process for all councillors. That's a given. However, with Councillor Ong, it's been rather interesting, let's say, in terms of he's found some of the processes to be rather challenging. I think really that Councillor Ong, and I agree with you, has been doing things the wrong way. He's really not following due process. He's not following natural justice. He's not following it to enable his complaint to be dealt with fairly by council. And I hope that he's taking all these lessons on board. In reality, I just hope that Councillor Ong does settle into his role. His other colleagues around the council table, including newbies, such as, for example, Councillor Chambers and so forth, are settling into their roles and appear to be doing the mahi that they've been elected to do. However, it's really been quite challenging for Councillor Ong, and I just hope, as I say, that he does settle in, that he doesn't do any more of this sort of stuff, and that he learns from his colleagues, and that he also follows any advice that's given by Mayor Barker and also by the Chief Executive Sue Bidrose.
Oh, Sue's not there anymore, it's Sandy Graham.
Sandy, sorry. Yeah. So that he follows the advice that is tended by both the Mayor and the Chief Executive and others within the governance team.
It doesn't seem, on genuine, it doesn't seem that he does at the moment, because there was incidents before Christmas as well where he's actually published texts that he'd sent to the mayor, and he'd published those online as well. And you kind of go like, how does the mayor or the CEO communicate now? Because if they're going to send a text or an email and it's going to go straight to the ODT, or it's going to go straight to Dunedin News,
that's just wrong. That's just an inappropriate way of doing things. That one councillor is sitting there and sending seemingly every communication that there has been or is to the ODT or to the wider social media. So it's very inappropriate. I just really hope that Councillor Ong doesn't continue with his behaviour. I was one of those who was very surprised by his election. There were plenty of people I know on What's News Dunedin and other groups and within the community who were surprised by his election. I haven't met him before. Myself, I do get around quite a bit, as people know, but I hadn't heard of him prior to the election campaign. So it'll be interesting to see what I make of him. I haven't met him, but from what I can gather from what I'm seeing publicly, it seems that he's very challenging to deal with. I'm just hopeful that really, as I say again, that even though I don't agree with the viewpoints that he puts across in terms of his political views or anything like that, I still have to work with him in my professional role, and I want to do that. However, but speaking personally as well, as a local resident, I'm really hopeful that all of our council can really get down to the nuts and bolts of what's really required. There are a number of issues that are coming to the fore this year, including, for example, the central government's imposition of a rates cap. There's free waters, there's housing. There are those sorts of issues which are on the agenda for council, as well as the forthcoming 10-year plan and so forth, and the annual plans. So there are things on the council's agenda that really need to be dealt with. But any sort of sideshows like this,
it's a distraction, isn't it?
It is. And
it's not what we're paying people for. That's the other side of it. It's not and it's a cost, right? As soon as you appoint someone to come and look at this as an independent investigator, there's a cost that wasn't budgeted for. To council, to the ratepayers, and it's like there doesn't need to be that, you know, and you know, code of conduct complaints, and we've seen numbers over the years, for various different reasons. They come with a cost, but they don't necessarily, and they come as a distraction. But we want. I mean, you know, you got central government talking about get down to core business. Well, not fighting with your peers is, you know, and actually sort of progressing what is the core agenda is core business.
Of course, there's going to be disagreements around the council table. It's a democratic body, but at the end of the day, these sorts of codes of conduct, complaints, and so forth can be really distractful of council business. I mean, I just don't know what the reality is behind the complaint that was taken by Councillor Ong against Councillor Chambers. I mean, I don't know the specifics other than what you said around alleged discriminatory comments, but at the end of the day, I think, I agree with you, that really council needs to get down. I mean, the vast bulk of councillors are getting down to the nitty-gritty, but it is one councillor who is unfortunately, really.
He also made a very interesting comment on his own page about it, and he kind of implied that all of his colleagues were behind him, you know, and all of his colleagues supported him, and you kind of going like, you genuinely shouldn't be making those kind of, you know, that's kind of subverting the course of fair natural justice, by trying to imply that, all his other colleagues are with him in support against him, in his allegation. But that doesn't necessarily. But no one else is talking about it, so we've got no one to believe but Councillor Ong, which again is just, in my mind, is like, actually, you need to be careful saying stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think Councillor Ong, as with any councillor, should be very careful about what they say about their colleagues or about the viewpoints or inferred viewpoints of their colleagues.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, there's going to be, hopefully the process will run its course without any further interference or interruption, that we'll get to see what the matter was and that it's resolved in a fair and just manner.
Yeah, I think that's all we can hope for. Now, moving on to topic number 2. I don't know if you saw the video. It got posted. It got posted up on What's News Dunedin on, I can't remember what night it was, and then and then there's been stories come out. I love it when news breaks on What's News Dunedin, and then days later you see it in the real media, and I would say that in inverted commas, about the sea lion.
The wee sea lion.
I think it was Micah or Mika that had basically decided that they wanted some fish and chips. They were strolling down the road with purpose, and they've ended up lying on the floor in the front bit of the Marlow Street takeaways, which has got a great reputation for fish and chips across Aotearoa anyway. And me personally, I see that as a massive endorsement. I mean, not only are people talking about, you've got 5-star Google reviews, you've also got 5-star sea lion reviews, because you've got the sea lion coming in and sitting there. Now, what I love about this is that we live in such an amazing, amazing part of the world, right? That you literally got wildlife walking up and down your streets and then flopping down in shops. It's just it feels so special to me, because I come from a part of the world where, if you see a blackbird once a week, you've had a wildlife experience in the UK, because it's so busy that you don't see it. You have to go a long, long way to find true wildlife in the UK.
Yes.
Whereas here, it is literally everywhere.
Of course, we're one of the wildlife tourism hotspots in New Zealand. I'll just tell you a story, incidentally enough, about sea lions and my own family's encounters with them. Back in the early 80s, my family farmed in South Otago. We farmed at a little settlement called Paratai, south of Balclutha, southeast of Balclutha, in between Kakapoint and Balclutha. My father had a farm there. We farmed on that, and it was just by the mouth of the Mata'au, the Clutha River, and the Pomahaka River at the confluence of the two. And it was really quite coastal, actually, as well, but given that it was the river mouth. One day, a sea lion came onto my father's property. It was quite rare at that time to have any sort of wildlife coming onto the property, especially sea lions. It was a huge sort of pup beast. It was huge. And actually, the dog, Laddie, our family farm dog, barked at it quite incessantly, and I think it drew my father's attention to the fact that there was a rather large intruder onto the property. Dad discovered it was a sea lion. He didn't have any initial luck in trying to get it off, but actually I think it actually attracted a reporter from the Clutha Leader, which is the local newspaper in that part of the world, a local community rag, to come along, do a photo as well of the dog trying to bark it off the property. It did slumber there for some days, but eventually it left of its own accord. So that was our encounter with our first encounter with a rather huge sea lion. They're a very coastal creature. One of the sad things, though, is that the fact is that an increasing amount of wildlife, including sea lions, are actually coming into the coast because of climate change.
Yep.
And the fact that the food sources are beginning to be impacted by that. So, and also, so far as I understand it, could be corrected here by some nature lover, that really what is happening is that they're also coming in to give birth in further inland than they would have in the past, given the vagaries and the impacts of climate change. So we really, behind these sorts of stories, we really have to get our thinking around the fact that climate change is impacting on the ability of wildlife to live in their own environments, and they're shifting more and more into ours, and so therefore there is that growing risk of the interactions between us as human beings, as people, and animals, especially wild animals, becoming more impacted due to climate change, having that negative impact.
And we're seeing, and there was another story in the paper about some young gentlemen at Smails Beach that were alleged to have not given those animals enough space. And that's one of the things. We are in pup season, right? So the mums are coming into the beach. They're trying to get away from the big aggressive males. They are trying to protect and birth new pups. And we should be giving these beautiful animals as much space, a minimum of 10 metres. Really more like 20 metres, because they're actually quite bloody fast. That's the other side of it. When they decide they want a motor, because they've got that sort of like the back feet that they don't have to drag themselves. They can actually run like dogs, They're actually bloody fast. So if you see our wonderful New Zealand sea lions around, if you see our fur seals around, like, give them space, because genuinely they are, they're grumpy because they are trying to, give birth and God knows what else. These aren't animals that you should be, getting too close to and trying to take photos with. If you're going to take photos, use a zoom. That's why we've got Zoom. So
That's
you
right.
can stand a long way away and make it look like you were close.
That's right. I was also with a friend in, I think it was Moraki, at the old restaurant there that closed, incidentally, at a seafood restaurant. I think it was, yes, it was owned by a prominent person. I forget her name now, but...
Was that Fleur's?
Fleur's, that's right. Fleur's restaurant. And we went there. I went there with a friend before it closed. And on the day I was with my friend at Moraki, at Fleur's, we saw a sea lion just out of range. I took a few photos. We were a fair distance away, but it was still within range. We could see it, but we didn't interfere with it. We didn't go and taunt it or do anything stupid or anything like that. It's really quite important, as you say, to give wild animals like sea lions their space. I think that's quite important, and people should really be dicks essentially around animals like that and behave badly. So I think it's quite important.
Awesome. Now, moving on to topic 3, we'll only talk on this one very briefly, is the news coming out of the States at the moment. And some of this stuff is heartbreaking, genuinely. There's an underbelly of racism that runs through current US government that just makes me sad. But there's obviously been the killing, murder of Renee Nicole Good by ICE agents who are supposed to be anti-immigration. They're supposed to be the ones enforcing immigration and enforcing illegal aliens or whatever, taking them away in America. Now, we've all seen the footage. Unfortunately, it's not something that I ever wanted to see in my lifetime, of a person trying to pin down in a vehicle and being shot 3 times in the head. Right? It's diabolical. It's disgusting. There's lots of adjectives to describe what we're seeing. But what's worse, in my view, is the way it's been defended by the powers that be in that government. Rather than saying, "Yep, full investigation," they're trying to imply that this poor woman got what she deserved. And I have a real problem with guns, first and foremost, and the gun culture that sits in America, because, the fact that people say, it's not guns that kill people, it's people that kill people. Yeah, but people only kill people because you've given them so many bloody guns, right? And there was I posted a story this morning onto What's News Dunedin that was on the staff, about a guy that shot and killed an Uber driver because they thought he was being scammed. He thought the Uber driver was doing it, and because he had a gun, he shot him 6 times.
Yeah.
Shot the woman 6 times. That doesn't happen if you don't have a gun, right? You might still have an altercation. You might have, and you might work out during that altercation, actually, that person had nothing to do with what you perceived to be, and because he was completely outside, what he thought was wrong, wasn't. But the powers that be are saying in America that this person, and they continue to do so, saying that this person has basically served it. And that just does not sit with me in any way, shape or form.
No, nor does it with me. At the end of the day, the Trump administration is racist, xenophobic, neo-fascist administration. It is a government which is completely governed by those principles. They've unleashed ICE, the Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency, they call it, the ICE for short, on just ordinary immigrants who, in many cases, are actually permanent residents or citizens of the United States. They've targeted innocent people as well as those who are in the country illegally, just as equally. They've targeted them in a very violent, open way.
That's the bit that bothers me, right? I mean, if you've got illegal immigrants, right, if you've got people in your country that are not supposed to be there, then you are well within your rights to say, actually, no, you need to, if you want to be here, you need to be here legally. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. But to round them up violently and to inflict pain, death, and those kind of things is not. That's where the line's drawn for me, because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, all right, yeah. So you sort out a problem if you kill an illegal immigrant, and of course they're no longer an illegal immigrant; they're just a dead person. But that should not be the go-to, in order to to cure your problem. And it almost seems like that violence is what they're trying to hope for in order to kind of fix their problem.
Personally, I believe that no one should be illegal. I believe that. Really, we don't control capital in the same way that we control the flow of labour, of people. Capital is just totally deregulated, whereas the ability of people to move around is restricted, really. And I mean, ideally, as a socialist, I believe in a world in which basically that capital is constrained, is controlled, whereas the flow of people is not. And so therefore, I believe in reasonably open immigration, and that countries should be able to have immigration policies which are fair, humane and just. That includes towards disabled people. Now, I was reading just this morning, there was a Facebook post from a friend of mine who used to work for DPA, incidentally, many years ago, and she posted a link to an American newsletter which talked about the disproportionately high numbers of disabled people who have been targeted by ICE in their so-called enforcement operations and have been targeted violently. They've not had their needs met, for example, in terms of if the person is deaf, they haven't had their needs for sign language interpretation addressed, and they haven't had also if people have health conditions or impairments which require special diets, those haven't been met while they've been detained in ICE facilities as well. They've been subjected to violent physical attacks and treatment and other forms of verbal and non-verbal intimidation, violence. So in reality, the ICE, the Trump administration's immigration policy is racist, it's sexist, it's xenophobic, it's ableist, meaning that it's anti-disabled people, and that it seeks to divide people. It seeks to drive a wedge between people in the United States. It's been done to really promote the idea that just look the other way. If you're a working person who's only making minimum wage or even less, then you should blame the immigrants who are supposedly taking your job. That's the old hairy chestnut of the of driving a wedge between working people based on their ethnicity or immigration status, whereas we should all be standing up against those in power who seek to drive a wedge between working people and non-working people and between working people themselves. And one of the ways in which that's achieved is through talking about immigration policy in a racist, xenophobic way.
And I totally agree. I mean, and some of the things you're talking about there, especially with regards to the disabled community, there, those are human rights infringements.
Absolutely.
Those are like genuinely, like they are things that we should be. That I thought, like genuinely, I thought that we dealt with those years ago, right? Like in my lifetime, before my lifetime, we dealt with some of those. That's why we have human rights commissions. That's why we have human rights lawyers. That's why we have those kind of people, because we've dealt with that. But those are actually they're quite massive. If you're not providing a level of care to a human being that has a disability that requires special attention, that's an absolute breach of human rights.
Not having access to essential supports, that is a breach of human rights. As we've known in this country with the government's efforts around cutting disability support services, but the same applies as well as in immigration settings, particularly in the United States and other countries which are toughening up on their immigration settings. And one of the other things I'll just point out is that there is a campaign against calling for government our New Zealand government, to get rid of the medically assisted, or I forget the term, but essentially what legislation currently empowers our immigration authorities to do is to turn down the immigration applications of disabled people.
Right.
And this means that, for example, if a disabled person or a person with a health condition comes into the country, they can be found to be, for example, a supposed burden to our houses and disability systems. So therefore they'll be denied the right to permanent residency, even though they may have other members of their family's whānau. It has been a recent instance of this, I think, that it's been drawn to the attention of media about a family, I think, based in the North Island. There's one, I think, disabled person within that family who has been denied the right to permanent residency, whereas the others have all been given residency. They're all in the same family,
right,
with siblings, parents, but not the one child, and that happens quite a bit. And
I remember coming here and I had to prove that I was fit and healthy, and I would not put a burden on the health system here in order to be granted residency. And that just doesn't, again, like you said, if I had a disabled child as part of my whānau, then suddenly, that's wrong. That's wrong at so many levels.
And my organisation, Disabled Persons Assembly, that I work for, backs this campaign to get rid of the medically determined health status assessment, whatever it's called. I'm just getting back into 2026 mode, so I forget
I hear you.
What it's called. But I think at the same time, yes, it needs to be removed. We, as disabled people, should be considered, in terms of immigration requests, we should have the same application criterion applied to us. What will we contribute in terms of our skills, and are we going to bring skills into this country that are needed? And that should be the sole criterion.
I agree. Now, I want to talk a bit about you in a little bit, but before we do that, I'm just going to get a word from our wonderful sponsor.
Have you checked out Hazur Kebab yet? It's your go-to for a delicious lunch, a tasty dinner, or anything in between. Order online to save time and pick up some delicious, authentic Turkish cuisine in just minutes. HazurKebabCafe.co.nz. Dine in or take away at 906 George Street.
Do you like a kebab, Chris?
I do every now and again.
Have you tried Hazur?
No, I haven't.
Opposite George Street Normal School.
Opposite George Street Normal. Okay.
Up at the top end of George Street.
All right. You go there regularly, do you?
I was there yesterday.
Oh, good.
So I go there quite a lot. So I'd run out of my loyalty cards with them.
Yeah.
And so I'd been keeping some stamps on a piece of paper, and they stamped 12 onto it yesterday. So I eat there quite frequently. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's good food, worth going. Now, many people in Ōtepoti will know you far better than they know me, to be completely fair.
Yeah.
But for the people that don't, I would like for you to give us a little bit of a background on yourself, on your good self, and kind of how you've come to be where you are, what sort of things you've been up to. Don't give me the full 87 years of life. I'm only joking. I know you're not that old. But yeah, maybe give me the 5-minute Cliff Notes version of Christopher John Ford, and what you've been up to and what you do out there.
Well, I'm commonly known as Chris Ford. I'm actually referred to. I only use that name on Facebook, given that I had another account under the name of Chris Ford, but I forgot the password and had to create another account, which is now the one I go through, which has my full legal name. Otherwise, I'm just plain old Chris Ford. The thing is that, just for those people who don't know me, I am a disability rights advocate and activist. I currently work as a policy advisor for Disabled Persons Assembly New Zealand. I'm currently on annual leave, which is quite nice. Until about a week or two from now, I had to go back to work, like many people. And it's going to be a very busy year, given that we're coming up to a general election year. My role principally is to provide policy advice in my work life to Disabled Persons Assembly, to my colleagues in Wellington, across the country. We actually work across the country. We're an actual virtual office, almost. All of our colleagues are spread across the country. I work under the wonderful Mojo Mathers, Chief Executive, who is a former Green List MP and was New Zealand's first deaf MP in Parliament. As well as that, principally, by the way, DPA works for the achievement of social equity for disabled people, equity for disabled people, so that we can enjoy the same rights and inclusion within society that non-disabled people have. So that we're working towards equity for disabled people and human rights, especially those rights which are articulated in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Even though I'm not here today in my work capacity, I do have to make reference to that because people probably would have seen me in media on that basis. I've also been a parliamentary candidate in the past. I've stood for, 3 political parties, but broadly on the same left-wing bent. I've stood for the New Labour Party, what was the old Clutha electorate, as a 20-year-old in 1990 for the New Labour Party, which was led by Jim Anderton, which was a left-wing splinter party from the Len, which formed as a result of the neoliberal Labour, the Len Labour government, the fourth Labour government going towards neoliberalism. Then I stood for the Alliance, which was the successor organisation for New Labour, of which New Labour was initially a part, and then the Alliance sort of merged into a left-wing party, and in 2005 I stood for that in Dunedin South and on the party list. And then in 2014 I was a parliamentary list-only candidate for the Green Party, assisting Matilia Tule when she was standing here in what was the old Dunedin North electorate and the other candidates and so forth in our region. As well as that, I've done freelance writing. I used to have a firm called Forward, which I've recently closed, given that my DPA work now takes up a lot of my time, and I've had a lot of stuff published. And as you referred to earlier, I've also been a broadcaster on ORFM. I broadcast on behalf of DPA. I used to host the DPA Notable Radio Show. I actually gave the show its name. Incidentally, it comes from what was the title of our Len National newsletter, which I just translated into our program locally, our program title. And then I recently handed that responsibility, the hosting responsibility, over to Amy Taylor, who followed me in the role of Kaituitui Community Network. I used to hold that role, incidentally, the one that Amy holds now, but I've moved on into policy. So it's said, and also too, I might just point out that I live with a number of impairments. My primary impairment is cerebral palsy. I live with cerebral palsy. I'm a proud person with cerebral palsy. I'm also hard of hearing. I wear hearing aids, and as well as that, I have those are my two principal impairments.
Fantastic. I mean, so cerebral palsy, that's one of those kind of generative. Am I right? That goes over. When you're born, you sort of like it gets worse and worse and worse over time.
No, it can actually. Cerebral palsy is different in many different ways. People can be affected by cerebral palsy. Essentially, it's a neuromuscular condition, a neuromuscular condition, and it's mainly caused by a number of factors. It can be caused by a pre-birth accident. It can be caused by birth-related trauma, as it was in my case. My mouth was excuse me, I think it was the fact that my mouth wasn't evacuated.
Right.
What do they call it? The birth, whatever it is.
Amniotic fluid or whatever.
That's right. Amniotic fluid wasn't evacuated quickly enough, and so therefore my respiratory. My airways were blocked, so for about a minute or two, I had oxygen deprivation, and that caused that affected my cerebellum, which is in the brain, and as a result of that, I was diagnosed at about 1.5 years, 2 years old as having cerebral palsy, because my mum incidentally noted that I missed a series of developmental milestones. Right. She had me assessed by a specialist here in Dunedin, I think it was, and it was determined that I had cerebral palsy. So that was I use a wheelchair. I mobilise using a wheelchair. I'm a wheelchair user. I'm a proud wheelchair user, by the way. I'm proud of who I am as a disabled person. I mean, disability pride is like, for example, GLBTQI pride. It's like women's pride. Pride to be, and it goes upon the same premise that we are proud that people like myself are proud of being a disabled person. There's nothing wrong with having a disability.
No, absolutely.
It's about what society does. It's about how society reacts to disabled people. It's about the attitudinal and physical, environmental barriers that society institutes against people with impairment that create the disability. It's called a social model of disability. But we aim to get around that by seeking by people like myself as a disability rights activist, seeking to ensure that society respects and upholds our human rights. It doesn't always do that. Governments don't always do that, but it's our duty as disabled people to call upon government, to call upon society to uphold our rights as disabled people, to uphold my right to participate in the community and to have those barriers to doing so removed.
And that's fun. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, it's just one of those things. I'm just sitting there thinking as I'm talking about it. Like in a world where equity is should be expected, yes. Right? So equity should not be something you have to fight for. Equity should be something that's just built into the fabric of our society. Yes. In my view. But you look at something like a doorway, right? Like if in the 1500s, like back in medieval days, a doorway was 5 foot high.
That's right.
Because people were 4 foot something, right?
That's right.
So I we don't see it in this country, but in the UK, there's a lot of places who've got very, very small doors, right? Because they were built before people got taller, right? So as we got taller, people decided that they needed higher doors. So now door frames are 6'6", right, or thereabouts, right? But what hasn't happened is that those doors haven't been made wide enough for wheelchairs. So people have considered the normal, what they consider to be, I put them in quotes, normal people, the general populace, and kind of gone, oh, we need to make these doors a bit taller. But by doing that, they've excluded and haven't even given consideration to the people that actually need the door wider.
It's about building a society around non-disabled people. That's what's traditionally happened.
Yeah.
And shaping our society around the needs of the non-disabled majority and not including the minority who identify as disabled people or who may, for example, acquire impairment due to old age. We've got an increasing number of people in the 65 plus age category. We've got that demographic is increasing.
Yeah, I saw somewhere, I think last week or the week before, where they said that there's now more people that are over 65 than are under 10 or something. Like, it's
absolutely
for the first time ever.
So really, governments and society in general need to prepare for an ageing society by building a fully inclusive, non-disabling society, by building communities which include everyone in terms of the physical and built environments, and also changing attitudes. It crazy. All goes together.
My house was built brand new in 2010. So I've been here 15 years. My house was brand new when I got here. It wasn't built for me. It just happened to be a spec house that was going up. I'll have that, right? And you couldn't get into it. It's a brand new house in 15 years, but you as a wheelchair user could not get into my house. And I find that, I genuinely find that jaw-dropping. Because how?
That's not surprising, given that 2% of housing in this country, 2% of all private dwellings are estimated to be accessible, with 98% being non-accessible. So think about that. A number of years ago, I think some people may know the story, but for the benefit of those who don't, I was homeless for about 11 months. My previous tenancy in Kaikorai Valley ended. I had a new set of landlords. They wanted someone to move in. And after 20 years, I had to leave the accessible property that I had been living in to that time. Incidentally enough, it was almost the time of COVID, so I spent most of the initial COVID period, 11 months from March 2020 until March 2021 in emergency accommodation at a motel here in North Dunedin. I have to say, though, that the wait time was about the average that I experienced was about the average for disabled people seeking public housing. I successfully, after some prompting through the media, got into a public house through Kāinga Ora in early 2021. I've been there ever since. However, it shouldn't have to be like that. Housing and disability is a global issue. All of the issues that are faced by disabled people in terms of barriers to healthcare, education, housing, participation in recreational and sporting life, all of those sorts of issues are common, and that includes housing. For example, in your birth country of the UK, it has been estimated that only anywhere between 2% and 10% of housing is accessible, and the same is true in the United States. About 2% of private dwellings there are estimated to be accessible, therefore meaning that disabled people are at greater risk, both nationally here in New Zealand, locally, and globally, of being homeless.
And that is bad. I want to come back to that in a second, but before we do, we're running out of time. I'm going to get another word in quickly from our sponsor.
Certainly.
Have you checked out Hazur Kebab yet? It's your go-to for a delicious lunch, a tasty dinner, or anything in between. Order online to save time and pick up some delicious, authentic Turkish cuisine in just minutes. HazurKebabCafe.co.nz. Dine in or take away at 906 George Street.
So, I mean, I understand, if you go back to the UK, for example, but even here, if your housing stock is 100 years old, and some houses here are, I can understand that it would not be wheelchair accessible. That whilst it's not right, it makes sense. what I don't understand is the houses that are being built right now are still not governed by any kind of rules that say that they should be accessible, and we should absolutely.
No, that's right. Yeah,
because as we get older, for whatever reason, through accident, through degeneration, through illness, whatever, we all stand. Our chances of becoming disabled grow exponentially.
Absolutely.
Right? And I get that, right? At some point in time, I probably won't be able to make the stairs in my place, right? And that's either because I get old or because I have an infirmment or because I might end up disabled in some regard, all right? So, but why aren't houses being built to cater for that, which I find is crazy, because I do know places like the ACC building that has just been that's been built,
said to be a showcase of accessibility.
That was the point I was going to make, was that has been designed with accessibility in mind, and in my mind, that's how everywhere should be. It shouldn't have taken till 2025 for that to be the case. Right, we're building a lot of places. That's
only a public space. The public buildings are governed by the Building Act, 2004, which has New Zealand Standard 4121, therefore meaning that public buildings, if they are modified or newly built, have to meet with that minimum accessibility requirement. Our preference as DPA is to go above and beyond that. But in terms of housing, when it comes to housing, there's been real market failure in that sense. What it has to be is that, as the DPA and other organisations are pushing for, including CCS, Disability Action and others, is for housing to be built to universal design standards, to what are known as universal design level 4 standards as a minimum, which stipulate, as you said earlier, wider doorways and also lighting which is effective, which is useful for example, for people, neurodiverse people, as well as for blind and low vision people, and making sure that housing is accessible for everyone across its lifetime.
Well, I've just seen 16 houses go up in 16 units go up in Green Island, Kaingaora site. And as I drive past, I can see that there's no way a disabled person will get in the front door.
No, there's been some disappointment around Kaingaora, and it's. Under the previous government, they had a target of making 25% of their new builds, accessible. It was a start. However, DPA and other disability organisations have really been advocating for the accessibility standard to be, as I said earlier, universal design level 4, ensuring that all of their housing, almost all of their housing, if it's 100% or close to that figure, that would be ideal. If Kaingaora could lead the way in that regard, that would be great. And also that we have building laws, that we have... I mean, there is an opportunity with the government's updating of the planning laws to do something. I don't know whether that will happen or not.
I strongly suspect it won't, Chris.
No.
I don't hold out a lot of hope for it.
No. But at the end of the day, what we need in this country is accessibility legislation.
Yeah, and you guys at DPA and yourself have been influential with regards to things like George Street.
Oh, absolutely.
With regards to providing that kind of advice to able-bodied planners with regards to what is required, and I guess it's very different because every single disability is slightly different. Right?
Absolutely,
so it's a real tricky line to walk over.
But it's about providing accessibility standards that incorporate inclusive access for everyone, regardless of what their impairment is, regardless of whether or not they live with disability. Ensuring that, for example, we have streets and public access ways which are fully accessible, including for people pushing children's strollers or making deliveries of heavy packages, equipment, whatever.
I agree. I mean, like, well, that sounds silly, but like no curb means less trip up hazard for me.
That's right, absolutely,
and full access to you as a wheelchair user. Like, it's not rocket science, is it?
No, it's about building safe, inclusive, accessible environments for everybody. I think that George Street is a very good example of that. The George Street redevelopment, it's small and paying its weight in gold. It's really demonstrative of what can be done. The Hamilton City Council sees that as the model, as the way to go for its redevelopment of their CBD. So if they're saying that in Hamilton, if they're admiring what we've done here, then we're leading the way.
Fantastic. And I think we've run out of time. That's a
good way.
That's a fantastic place to end it. Absolutely. You're welcome back on the show anytime, Chris.
Well,
fantastic.
certainly.
Thank you very much for joining us. And just sit there while I just round out the show.
Certainly. Kia ora.
Well, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you for tuning in. I've been Richard Knights, and you've all been wonderful. Remember, if you're looking for a robust, respectful adult debate about all things local and further afield, and a welcoming online community that doesn't take itself too seriously, come and find What's News Dunedin on Facebook and join our fun. On next week's show, we're talking to Amy Taylor, senior firefighter from Fire and Emergency, who's based out of the Dunedin Central Fire Station, and we look forward to seeing you next Friday at 12 on OAR FM. And if you want to listen to the show again, or simply share it with your friends, you can find the podcast at oar.org.nz, or even on Spotify, YouTube, or your favourite podcast provider.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.